So for this tutorial, we're going to look at the MCR3U summative assignment, which is sometimes referred to as the functional art assignment. It's where you're going to take a piece of art and you're going to try to find the graphs of all the functions from the course, and then you're going to come up with a set of equations that describes all of those graphs with domain and range, etc. I want to focus on the practical part, which is how are we going to get this working. In particular, I'm going to focus on an electronic version of this. So the first thing you need to do is find your art, and don't skimp on time in finding your art. I'm just going to pick something fairly quickly because this is just for demonstration purposes, but you have lots of time to work on this. Take your time, maybe even try out 2 or 3 different pieces of art until you find something that you like. Now in my case, because I don't have to really worry about getting every single function from the course, I'm just going to pick something that I like. I was going through, I did a search on this page. The way I came up with this is I did a Google search for abstract art, and then I selected images. I only wanted image results, and you can see that gives me a whole bunch of pictures in a nice format to choose from. And I was going through, there are lots of candidates here, lots of things that have, you want to look for stuff that has curves in it, and you don't want to, straight lines are okay, but you don't want a ton of straight lines. So you might want to explore things and see whether or not you can pick out the different shapes that might be in our course. And in my case, I'm just going to go with something that appeals to my inner geek. Maybe that's my outer geek, I'm not sure. And that is this image of Captain America. And so first thing you need to know is whether or not you can actually make a copy of this. And the way to do that is to bring up the image itself and right-click, and I'm going to look for notations like this: copy image, or I want to be able to save image as, etc. So I'm just going to copy the image and go straight into a document. So the place to get that document, if we go back to the wiki, you'll notice that I have 2 OpenOffice documents. These are not regular Word documents, or these are not regular word processing documents. These are actually graphic documents. They're from LibreOffice Draw, and that's a program that you can get for free. I'm not sure what the Microsoft Office equivalent is for this, but you can get OpenOffice. Actually, the latest version is called LibreOffice. So if you're going to download that, either at the school or at home, look for that. Now, portrait versus landscape has to do with the orientation. You probably are familiar with it, but in this case you can see this image is wider left to right, and it is narrower top to bottom. That is a landscape image. So I'm going to choose landscape for my document, and I just click on that, and I'm going to download that document. Now it will probably download and save to your drive or ask you, but in my case I've set it up to automatically ask me what I want to open it with. I'm going to use LibreOffice Draw, which is the default for this type of document. It's going to open up, and these are both the portrait and the landscape. These are documents I prepared in advance with a grid on the full size of paper. So this is ready for you to, and the way you want to do it is you just want to, now you see I clicked on that and that caused dots to appear all around. That means I've actually selected the grid. So I don't want to do that. I actually want to select an area. If I click, left click on an area or right click on an area between the lines, you can see it didn't select the grid that time. That's what I want to do. And now I can paste in my image. When your image goes in, it's going to go centered, hopefully. But if it's not centered, then what you can do is select that image. So I want to show you the difference. Here is me left clicking and selecting the grid, and notice the dots are on the outside, and left clicking and selecting the image itself. You might have to do it a few times until you get it in the right spot. And now you can see these green dots are around the periphery of the image. So if I happen to put it into my document and it's in the wrong location, I can go to alignment and I can center it. I can go to alignment and I can center it top to bottom, and that returns it to the center. Now in my case, I'm actually going to move it to the corner because I'm going to expand this image. I want it to take up as much of this page as possible. And the way that I'm going to do that, obviously you can't see me doing this, but I'm holding down the Shift button on the keyboard, and then I'm going to go and grab this corner with my mouse button, left clicking and holding. And when I do that, you can see even though I move the mouse in all sorts of directions, the image will always move in a way that preserves the ratio of height to width. And I want that because I want the image to look as much like what the artist intended as possible. So I'm going to just drag it down until it reaches the edge of my grid. And so there I have my image. And now that's about as big as I can make it. So now I'm going to arrange it, center it, which is pretty much centered already. And I'm going to center it top to bottom. So there we go. So that's step one. I've got my image. I pasted it in the document. The last thing I need really to happen here is I need my grid lines, which are in the background, to be in the foreground. And the way I do that, actually, since I already have the image selected, see the green dots? If I right click on the image, I'm going to arrange and I'm going to send the image to back. And that's going to move the image to the back of this whole picture, which moves the grid lines to the front. In looking at these grid lines, they're not ideal. These grid lines are getting washed out by the black in some locations. They're showing up reasonably well. They show up okay against the blue, very well against the red and against the white. So you can see you are going to have color issues here. If you choose a particularly dark image, that can be a problem. There are ways around it though, and you should experiment with them. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to actually now modify the grid. So I'm going to click on the grid itself, and you can see now my green selection points are on the full outside of the picture. That means it's the grid. Then I hover over one of the lines of the grid and I right click, and I'm going to choose the line tool. That's going to let me change pretty much anything I want to about the lines, their thickness, their type, and specifically I'm going to look at their color. So I'm just going to choose, usually it's shades of gray that you're going to want here, and if I click OK, you can see that lightened all of my lines. They are still visible even against the white backgrounds, but they're also visible against the blue and the black. So what you want to do is try to find a grid color that's going to let the grid show up no matter what, because you're going to be using this grid to come up with your equations. So you need it to be fairly accurate. Now let's say that you're still not totally happy with that. You do have other options besides fooling around with the color of the grid. And the other thing you can do is what's known as the transparency of the image itself. So now I'm going to left click. I'm left clicking on a space that's over the image, but it's between grid lines. So it's in the middle of a square. And by clicking there, notice that the green selections are now on my image. Once I do that, if I go up here in my menu, it's on an image menu, it's the one with the % sign. If you float over it, you can see it says transparency. I can increase the transparency of the image, and I don't know how well you can see it. As I'm increasing that, the image is progressively starting to fade and fade and fade. Now I don't want my image to go away completely, but the reason I'm doing this is because I'm hoping that it will cause my grid lines to be a little bit more visible, especially when I print it. You have to remember when you print these things out, especially if you print them out black and white, they're going to look quite different than what they do on a nice color screen. So now that I've faded this a bit, I might actually want to go back to my grid lines and make that a little bit darker again. So instead of that gray, I'm going to go to maybe a 70% gray. It's a little bit darker. It's still showing up against the black. It's not great, but it's okay. And now it's certainly showing up better against everything else. So once you get to a point, and I really think I recommend that transparency for anything with some darker imagery in it. So once I've got that, I'm definitely going to save this to my P drive, and then I'm going to maybe try, I don't want to waste paper by printing out a ton of these, but I might print out one and use that to see if I can find various functions from the course. Just use it as a rough copy. You're probably going to throw it away, work in pencil, but it'll give you a chance to try drawing in some shapes, some X and Y axes, etc. Now, before I wrap it up here, let's go back and let's consider what a portrait would look like, and let's choose something else. Let's actually choose something quite dark. I want to show you what that can look like and what some of the problems might be. So here's one that's quite dark. Let's see. Now that's more of a landscape. So let's look for another one. I guess I might just have to work in landscape. There's one that's very dark. Okay, so that's a little abstract spider web. So let's copy that. You might think that that image is great, and so I'll go back to the web page, to my wiki. I'm going to download another copy of this. I'm going to open up a new landscape document, and I'm going to paste my image. And so, well, that image is pretty much already full width, so I'm going to center it. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to make any changes to that, but I am going to send it to the back, arrange, send to back, and when I do that, I don't even see my grid lines. They're very visible, very faint here. So the first thing I might do with this one is I might select my grid lines. There we go, and change the line, and now I'm just going to reverse those. I'm actually going to choose, how about a very light gray, and see how that shows up. So it doesn't look nice anymore. The art itself doesn't look nice, but now the grid lines are very visible. Maybe that gray is a little too bright, so let's choose something a little bit more moderate. Still a fairly light gray, but let's say more of a 40% gray. So a little bit darker. I could probably go darker still, but you get the point. Also, again, don't underestimate the value of, actually you can see I can change the line style here if that menu is selected. Don't underestimate the idea of changing the art itself though. So let's bump this up right away. I'm just going to bump this up to 25% transparency. And so with 25% transparency, maybe even 50. So 50% transparency, that's pretty light. That might be too light. 35. 35 is not a bad compromise. And again, the reason for that is if you're gonna be printing this out, you still need to see the detail, but you don't want to be just blanketing your printer with this dark background. Now, to be honest with you, although this is a neat looking little piece of art, this is, I think, a terrible choice. There's just too much black here. The detail of the web and behind there is not a good one. So don't get too attached, don't get too sentimental about the one that you're using. So in my case, for example, that other one that I came up with Captain America on it, if that's not a good chance, you see right here, discard. Don't be afraid to discard what you've got if it's not a good choice. Okay, I hope that serves as a good introduction to the steps you're going to take in order to get your art on with a grid on top of it in an electronic format. Once you're happy with it, once you've changed things like the grid lines and transparency, you're going to save a copy of that. And now if you make a mistake, it's going to be much easier for you to print off another copy and for you to reproduce your work. So take the time to do this part right, and it will pay off for you as you work through the summative over the next handful of weeks.